Drodzy Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to begin our next panel, which is about interactive narratives. And I would like to introduce the participants of the panel.
Będziemy dyskutować w gronie pół na żywo, pół wirtualnie.
Part of this panel will be live, part of this will be virtual online. So first let's introduce somebody who's joining us online. These are collaborators. We have Lena Thiele.
I'm sorry, I started speaking in Polish, but I was supposed to speak in English. And also, okay, let me introduce today's speakers for the panel that is dedicated to interactive narratives. Together with us online are two speakers, Lena Thiele. She's an author and creative director of the Berlin-based media company Mikwo Studios, and has been designing and producing award-winning digital media formats such as web series, interactive storytelling formats, and games since 2003. Her main focus is on the creative combination of state-of-the-art technology and high-quality journalistic content to create innovative formats that intensively involve the recipient and create an experience. The production, the web series Net Wars, Out of Control, has received numerous awards, including the South by Southwest Innovation Award for Best Visual Media Experience, the Grimm Online Award, and the Prix Italia 2015. Since 2012, as head of studies and trainer, she has developed the audience design training program at Torino Film Lab. And she's also co-author of Myriad VR, about which she's going to tell us a little bit, and about Net Wars. Lena Thiele is currently a professor at the Film Academy in Cologne. And the other person who is together with us online is Frédéric Dubois. Frédéric is a Canadian-German author, producer, journalist, and scholar of digital media. He has co-authored and produced award-winning interactive storytelling features such as Atavash and Field Trip, and co-edited two books, the collection of essays Autonomous Media and the graphic novel Extraction, Comics Reportage. Frédéric has worked with National Film Board of Canada and Arte on digital projects such as GDP, The Whole Story Interactive, and Fort McMoney. He is also editor of the Internet Policy Review, an open access journal on internet regulation. But what is also maybe most importantly in this context, he has been a resident at the Studio for Interactive Narratives, and he's been collaborating with us for the last 1 year and a half, and we've been developing interactive projects together. I must mention one more person at this moment before we start the panel and before I introduce Eva. The other person who was resident at the studio and who has developed the whole process with us was Sandra Gaudenzi. She couldn't be here with us because she was involved in at the Sheffield Festival, and she has had other obligations that she could not postpone. So our guest present here with me today, here away from the keyboard, is Eva De Galska. Eva teaches at the Polish-Japanese Academy of Information Technology at the Faculty of New Media Arts and works in the field of digital technologies for museums and cultural institutions, designing technologies, researching how technology is adapted, and implementing new solutions. Among other things, she worked for the National Museum in Warsaw, where she was the originator of a hackathon to develop ideas that bring the museum closer to its audience. She shares her knowledge on the blog New Technologies and the Museum. And Eva has collaborated with us. She has devised an audience research program or a UX research program where we have looked at the interactive pieces that we have developed to see how they work in practice, and then to have feedback to see what we can, how we can make them work better. I mean, she will be talking about that. The other person I would like to introduce a little bit right now, Katachina Buraten. She's my partner in the studio. She doesn't like to speak publicly, so she won't be here on the stage with us, but we have done everything together. So she is here, so to say. So Katachina is a producer, curator, and author of digital and new media projects. She is the chief coordinator of the lab, of the Visual Narratives Laboratory, and a project manager at the studio. So we collaborate very closely. She's also the co-founder and president of the Total Immersion Foundation, and for years she was a curator at the Art House and Experimental Cinema Kino Lab at the CCA in Warsaw. So to start off our discussion, I will have a short presentation on the. Hello, Lena. It is nice to see you. It's great to have you with us.
Nice to see everyone.
Yes.
Well,
I will have a short presentation on the studio, what we've been doing and why we've been doing it. Then Lena will tell us about her experiences and about how her practice developed in the recent years. Then Frederick will have the floor to develop some ideas of his own, and then Eva will tell us about the research part of the studio, and then we can have a discussion. So, can I have the presentation, please? Mogę prosić o prezentację z laptopa? So I called this short presentation, Why Interactive Web-Based Experiences, because nobody seems to believe that they make sense anymore. Everybody is interested in other things. There was a hype around iDocs like 15 years ago, and everybody thought that was going to be the thing. And for some years it seemed like that. And but iDocs have remained a marginal, I would say, medium in the whole landscape of media production. Although they are very ambitious and complex and big projects very often. And so there is this question, why should we do that? Why should we, is it really important to do this, to still find funding and initiatives to produce such experiences? One of the main problems is, of course, that they don't generate any income, so there is no real market, yes, where they could function. At the same time, both Katachina and I, we are convinced that it does make totally sense to produce such experiences and to try to develop them further and to explore them for many reasons. One of the reasons is that this is the one medium that really connects all kinds of different media. Yes, we can have text and animation and film and 3D models and all kinds of objects that interact and create one sort of narrative. Yes, and in this sense, this is a medium where we can develop some sort of visual literacy, yes, where people who are accustomed to the current digital sphere, to experiencing the world through the browser window, where you can formulate enunciations in a language or in a form that is connected to how we look at the world through this mediated, in this mediated way. So in a way, while we see that the web is becoming more and more standardized and also closed through platforms, through same design, yes, everything looks more and more similar, yes. I think that, or we believe that these kind of projects, these kind of explorations can help foster a different kind of public sphere, a different kind of literacy, a different kind of sociality, maybe even. Yes, if we think of works who engage the viewers in different ways. One of the questions, of course, and one of the problems is with interactive web-based formats is where is the work, yes? In the sense that it is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And that is a question that I just want to leave open because, you know, everybody has been streaming for the last couple of years like crazy, yes? I mean, the pandemic, until the pandemic, it was unthinkable that a big film festival would stream a film, yes? Right now, it has become standard that we are able to participate in film festivals remotely, that we can stream, that we can have access to films on VOD platforms, yes? At the same time, right now, there's such an overload of new productions that it's impossible for any single individual to keep up with the flood of new series, documentaries, you know, films on all these platforms that have emerged and exploded, yes? So we think that there is still space, an interesting space, between these floods of streams, yes, where a certain multimodal, multi-perspectival, yes, practice can take place and have a site also, yes. So this is why we decided to engage in this studio and to develop this practice. And what was interesting for us with Katachina and our collaboration is that we come from different, we are differently situated. I come from a photography background, and I was always interested in why the digital sphere is always treated as a secondary, inferior space for serious photography, yes? It is a space for documentary at best, yes? For documentation, I wanted to say, not documentary, yes? For documentation of the real work which is out there in the world, yes? It is not treated seriously, yes, by serious artists, whatever that means. So my goal was to change that, to work with serious artists who work with photography and try to find a space where this photography can function as a kind of autonomous work. Kasia, on the other hand, she comes from a film background. She's a film editor who got interested in immersive media. So for her, she comes with the background of filmmaking, and these are things that we wanted to combine in our studio and in our practice. So. Not to talk too long, I just wanted to give you a short rundown of the projects that we have developed and we are developing, to introduce the artists who are partly here to a large extent, so you can actually approach them and talk to them and ask them about their projects. Some of them are still in production, and they are you can learn more about them in the case studies that were prepared by Titus Szabelski, about whom I am going to talk in a second. So this is the short panorama of our projects. Amazon is a critical project about the practices and the influence on the working on the structure of work today by Amazon. It's a project done by Titus Szabelski, but also tongue-in-cheek ones that throw a light on how Amazon impacts work today. And it can also be treated as a kind of repository for actual action, in the sense that everything that you see on this site you can download later as material for your own practice. And we tested that during the Photo Month in Krakow a couple of years ago when the project was ready. We did an 8-hour performance when using only office materials and the website. We built an exhibition that was a commentary on the practices of Amazon, and people coming in during the day could discuss with us and ask questions, and Titus was there all the time, and he engaged in discussions also with activists in the Amazon workforce, which was very interesting. And because it was the pandemic, we streamed the whole thing in 360 online, so people could also join us through their phones and screens and whatever. And Titus also developed later a desktop documentary that further develops the idea of the project. So it has become something that works in very different formats and in different languages. You can see the project on the exhibition in the new media building. The same counts for Makeshift by Paweł Starzec. That is a project that was designed and programmed by Michał Szota. Paweł is also a photographer, a documentary photographer, and he embarked on a very big project. He decided to find and document the sites of concentration camps during the Bosnian War, and most of them were not located. So he spent 8 years looking for them, and he built a project that's called Makeshift. His idea was to show us the landscapes or the places without a commentary, and then the text part in the exhibition would elucidate what kind of site we have before our eyes. We tried to use that moment of this junction of image and text in the project itself. You can also see it in the exhibition. It's also presented there. Another project that we developed, and that is a direct response to the pandemic, is called Why Pictures. I did it together with my colleague who now also works at the film school, and we teach together, Witek Orski. He's also a visual artist. And we had this idea during the photo month of the year after this presentation of Amazon. How can we have an artistic or a dialogue? Yes, a dialogue based on images also in a time of social distancing. So we built this little platform. The idea was for it to have a blog-like structure. We divided it into topics, into chapters. For every chapter, social pictures, non-human pictures, city pictures, pictures of war. We invited speakers with whom we had conversations, like for example with Joanna Zielińska and Trevor Paglen for the non-human pictures chapter, and then we invited artists to comment on the effects of that conversation. And this is how we tried to produce a dialogue that is ongoing and that is happening online. Right now we are working on a chapter that is a commentary on the war that is going on in Ukraine. The next project that we're doing is Zarastanya Overgrowth. It's designed by, the project lead is Angelika Cebula, and you see the whole crew here. Many of them are here today, so please approach them if you want to know more about the project. It is also part of the presentations of the case studies. It is a project that is a commentary on the situatedness of memory. About a community that was dislocated for a sulfur mine in Poland. The next project I wanted to briefly show you is the school A World. It is a project that is built around a school in a small provincial town in the east of Poland that was built in the socialist times as a kind of grassroots initiative, and that was very important for the community. And that school was closed in the 90s. Yes. So Iga Łapińska, the director of the piece, she's also doing a documentary about the school. And this is an interactive expansion of it, or a supplement of it, or a different version of it, where her protagonists can tell their stories about this place and their experience of it and of this story. Another project that is in development right now, and we'll be finishing it next this fall, is called New Spirit. It is a project by Laura Pawela, a film editor, who is also in the doctoral program here at the school, and she's doing this together with Lauren Dubowski, who is also here in the audience. So thank you, Lauren, for being with us. And designed by Emilka Bojańczyk. it will be there soon. Yes. And the last project is my project, actually. It's called Stoss. It's about national identity as a structure of violence, and it is based on a medieval sculptor, Wojciech Stoss, who was imagined to be Polish in the 19th century by Polish early art historians, and there was a huge fight about him, whether he was Polish or German, including military action. So it's I put it into a very poetic framework, but this is the topics that it deals with. So what we've been trying to do is find also various formats and various forms to work with these interactive works, and then collaborate with Eva and see what part of our ideas is actually comes across, yes, and how we can maybe change them or nudge them in the right direction to make them more, I don't know, słowo trafny? Yes. Make them work better, whatever that means. So thank you very much. And I would like to invite Lena for her presentation.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Can you hear me? It's not fine? Sound okay?
Yes.
So I will try to share my screen. Hope that works also. So here we go. Everybody could see? Yeah, it looks good as far as I can see. If not, just interrupt me. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me and for having me here. I remember I don't even know, 2015, I think, with NetWars in Warsaw, where Catherine invited me. So I'm happy to be back and continue the discussion, going back to NetWars, actually, and moving on to Myriad. That's what I'm going to do very briefly today, in around 15 minutes, even if it's two big projects. The first, NetWars, with a focus on a 5-part web series, and my current project, Myriad, that I'm working on, with a focus of the VR experience, which is also part of the project. That can be a starting point maybe for a later discussion. What did I learn from NetWars with the role of the web series being part of as a browser-based experience, and why I actually embraced VR for Myriad, while there's also a web format integrated there, even if it's not produced yet. So that can be something that we can dip into later in the discussion. Maybe 2 words about my background, that you know a little bit where I come from, even if I had that nice introduction already from you, Christoph. But as you can see, that is actually where I come from. I mean, on the left, you see a Commodore 64. That's when I was 10. I had a bigger brother, so he was starting programming, and I was the mean little sister, right? Always jumping at the computer because I found it quite interesting. Started learning a little bit of BASIC and tried to do my first games and stories in there. And on the right, you see 215. That was Sheffield, one of the first actually exhibitions that I've seen, which were purely VR. So that was also, I was there as a visitor. So we did not really exhibit anything of our own. So I'm working since end of the 19th in the field of digital media. And I think the interesting thing is I moved to my professional work as a practitioner through a lot of different forms and platforms and markets. So I developed software, I developed games, narrative formats, on the other side, I'm always working at the academics, which led now to what you also mentioned, Christoph, that since 6 years, I'm also professor and building the International Master Program Digital Narrative for the art and design. And Frederick is now a colleague of mine, which is nice, since half a year, right? Half a year, around that. And since then, we are constantly trying to strengthen the research creation approach, where we are bringing together both sides that we are both working on, coming from the academic as from the practice, asking us also questions behind the work that we do from both sides. And this is also what we're doing with our students, to work on both ends, always entering the work with a research question. In my professional side, maybe also interesting into 2010, I moved from software and games, working with film production companies. And one project that I also just wanted to mention, because some of you know, and that was the first actually narrative browser-based experience to a wide extent, was called Farewell Comrades. That was also linked to a book, an exhibition, and a 6-part documentary TV series. And it was due to the 20th anniversary of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that was, by that time, even based on Flash. There was a big discussion if we still use Flash. We did. So if you move also in the question of archiving and how to work later on with the works that you do, I mean, this project, for example, is more or less dead due to that it's built on Flash as a technology. But also, I think, an interesting narrative concept. The project that I want to go a little bit deeper on is a cross-media project about cyber warfare. We released it in 2014, and it's called Net Wars Out of Control. And I will jump in with a short teaser.
Do you remember the attack on Estonia in 2007? All that commotion, all those people without money or gasoline? Well, that was in the past. We were just fooling around then. Welcome to our little shop of opportunities. Why oppress people when you can infiltrate them? Why torture them when you can fuck them? Whatever it is you want to teach the world, I don't judge. I'm just a salesman.
So Net Wars is a project, as I said, about cyber warfare. By that time, interestingly, it was even before the Snowden revelation, a topic where people still felt it was sci-fi, and then Snowden came out and it got a little bit of a different angle. And as you can see now, I mean, it's still a topic that's of high relevance. It's told on 5 different platforms. And we created a whole story world and IP. And the IP and story world is influenced by 2 different elements. One is the project is divided in 2 angles. So we use the power of fictional storytelling on the one hand and combine it always with real facts and journalistic information behind that. And as you can see with the different formats, they are connected as a connecting point to the audience in one or the other section. So as you can see up there, we have an ebook and audiobook series that was a pure fiction thriller, but all based on science facts. We had a fictional interactive graphic novel, a TV series that was never produced, actually. Down below on the left, you see that is a TV documentary that was aired on Arte. We had a purely fact-based journalistic website and a web series up on the left that strongly had fictional elements, but all based on data visualization and facts. That's the first thing that the whole IP is based on. The second is we decided, because I said cyber war is quite an intangible topic, so it's a lot about things that you cannot smell, you cannot grasp. It's something that is very data-based. This is why we decided to use a very personal and emotional approach. So in the core of the whole IP, we positioned our character a salesman. You already met him in the teaser. And he is a cyber weapons dealer. So that's the fictional character that we built. And those characters do really exist. So actually they are weapons dealer, but they don't deal with real weapons. They deal with cyber weapons. And this character is the linking element in the whole story world. So he appears in each and every format. We wrote a backstory behind it. We built the whole character. And he is linking all the formats up to a certain extent. And on third point, I think that's the interesting thing, why we build it up like this kind of media framework, is that each and every format is not only based on different storylines and on the angle of facts and fiction, but it also addresses different markets and different audiences. As I just mentioned, for example, the the fictional audio and ebook and paperback novel. It was also printed. That was commissioned by Basta Löbe, a publisher, and they positioned it as pure thriller, right? Even it was based on scientific facts of cyber warfare. While, for example, the TV documentary aired on Arte was a pure TV documentary, being in the slot for documentary in that field. So you could see that from that story world with the different angles, we also address different markers and different audiences. To go a little bit deeper into the 5-part web series, the web series had a very specific angle. We decided to do this, to go on the web browser-based with a narrative format, because we want to involve our audience in the medium we are talking about, which is a digital platform, right? So we are talking about cyber warfare. So it's kind of a no-brainer to saying, okay, we're also going into the digital medium where those things partly happen, and create a format to address our audience. And the approach was that we want to really make them feel, so not only inform, but going through the emotion, how they are affected. And I will jump into another short trailer that gives you a little bit of an introduction into the web series.
Every day, we get alarming news about data spying, cybercrime, digital attacks on infrastructure, and manipulation of minds on the internet. The transmedia project NetWars provides a tangible experience of the potential dangers of cyber war using 5 different platforms: a 52-minute TV documentary, a full, responsive 5-part interactive web documentary, a fictional interactive graphic novel for tablets, an ebook and audiobook series, and a paperback novel. With a provoking and interactive mix of facts and fictional drama, consumers of the cyberspace become engaged in an immersive story world over all platforms. In the center, the salesman, a notional cyber weapons dealer.
This is not about petty crime. This is about war. Amigo, the ultimate game.
In the 5-part interactive web documentary, the salesman shows the audience just how vulnerable they really are.
How does it feel? How does it feel? How does it feel? When everything around you suddenly goes dark.
NetWars, Out of Control, puts the user in the center of our fragile modern society. It delivers the facts behind a series of highly personalized, emotional cyber war scenarios. The webdoc uses new ways of immersive storytelling by integrating highly emotional fictional narrative with scientific information and data visualizations. International expert knowledge gives an insight into the world of cyber warfare and its international political dimensions. Gaming elements trigger the user's credulity and reveal how easily they could be affected.
Do you really think that you have nothing to hide? Well, I'm sorry to say it, but you do, my friend. You just don't know it yet.
I know it still uses quite a lot of buzzwords, but the thoughts behind that is that I think that's interesting when you look at the role of the audience and that's also interesting in regards to Myriad later on, that we want to put our user in. So I don't know if you know that chart. It's quite interesting because it has the difference between the character that you are. Do you have an impact on the story or not? And are you really a character or are you a ghost in there? And of course, with us, you are a character because you are you. I'm sorry, there's a big thunderstorm coming up, so I get a little bit of dramaturgical background maybe here. So, so we start in the beginning to address the audience as an interactive user in the web, where you think you do have an impact, right? Where you think you can change. And then we take away the control, right? So we let them feeling being manipulated and we put them in the position that they are the victim. So this is actually the dramaturgical arc that we also push the whole web series through. And one last thing that I would like to mention So I told you about the different audiences, and one thing that is also interesting, because you mentioned, Christoph, in your starting presentation, that we also organized the whole project that the content could be cross-used. So for example, infographic animations that were used in the web doc as part of the dramaturgy was also information clips that could be used on the website and in social media, and part in the TV documentary, and the interviews from the TV documentary were part of the web series. So it was all very interconnected, all regarding also the content that we produced, not only the character and the storyline. So that was NetWars, and now there's a huge jump into the project called Myriad, something completely different, as you can see. Myriad is the project that I'm working on since 3 years now, and it's an international project that sensitizes people to the indispensable interplay and interrelations of all life on planet Earth. It's narrated from the perspective of globally migrating animals in times of continuously man-made change in the Anthropocene, and is realized as an immersive media experience at the intersection between current scientific research, art, and storytelling. The questions that we had with this project is how can science facts related to animal migration in the Anthropocene can be narrated and experienced in different formats by a diverse audience. The goal of the project is for our audience that we want to create an understanding for global dependencies, and we want to initiate a discourse regarding the relationship between human, earth, and living beings. So not the easiest thing to do. And nurturing the discourse on the development of alternative future scenarios, and encouraging concrete actions on the conservation of biodiversity. And the question that lies behind it for myself as media creator, that is not part of the project core, but for me as creator is, can we, and if how, create new relationship between human nature by using digital technology? So this is a question that always lies behind it, right? What kind of technologies are we using, what for, and can it work at all, and what are we doing? So the kind of reflective area. Myriad, you see, it's a kind of a similar way of working. Also works as a story world, and it has two different, again, angles to work with. One is the emotional side, and one is the information side. The emotional side is something that we cover through the animal stories of migrating animals, because they are really amazing stories to be told, and they're trying to build the relationship between human nature. On the informational side is the science facts and about the interconnectedness of the world, because migrating animals, while they're migrating, they're moving through different ecosystems, and changes in ecosystems in one may have a ripple effect in other ecosystems. So you can really go with the science facts and explain the interconnectedness. And as you can see, there are a lot of different formats, again, attached to it, different formats that have a different entry point, same like with Myriad. And they also speak to different audiences and different markets. This is what we had on the content side. On the visual side, similar to the salesman, what we did here is taking the intersection of science and art and created it in the visualization of the world of Myriad. And we decided to work with charcoal carbon that we broke down, and that we really worked as core of the narrative language and visual language, because carbon is the core element of all life, right? And of course is part of the main discussion of carbon dioxide in the whole climate change. And out there, we took a looking glass, and we broke the carbon. From there on, we created with real image and the fictional image and the part of the carbon in the studio in 3D, the world. That was the first mood for Myriad. Jumping into the VR experience. The VR experience is a 30-minute virtual reality experience that takes the visitor into the world of 3 different animals: the bald ibis, Arctic fox, and green sea turtles. And you, as your audience, you follow the footsteps of these animals and embark on a journey while actually being exposed to growing man-made challenges. So in the overall framework, same like with the web doc with the emotional connection, this also goes for creating the closeness to the animal. So we are very much on the emotional side, and let the audience experience themselves as part of an interconnected system of life and an embodiment. And challenges with balanced narration, world sensations, and interactions, and to convey the message. So first thing is we had the decision not making the world of those three animals real in 3D, but having an abstract form, working with charcoal, having a very artistic style in an artistic abstract world. And I will jump into a short teaser.
Carbon, a connecting element in a perpetual dance of life and death, from the smallest particle to all living beings. Myriad, where we connect. An artistic experience and a poetic journey along the global paths of migrating animals. Follow these messengers on their long journeys each year, crossing high mountains and wide oceans, migrating with the wind and the currents, living through threats, trying to survive. Pressured systems, sensitive creatures. Perpetual motion of endless stories and timeless change. A globally interdependent system of life. Follow their long journeys and see the world through the eyes of many.
So again, looking at the role of the audience to achieve our goals, I'm going back to the same little graphic, is that here in the beginning, and you are as a human positioning VR, right? You are embodied, but we decided from the point of view and the narration not to address you as human being in the beginning. So you're just following the animal and it's not defined. You're also not addressed as an animal, right? So your whole position is not defined, while at the end, you become human in this system. And I will show you how we actually did that with two little clips. You see in the beginning, on the left-hand side, this is the menu where it all starts. It's a white stage where you will meet all three animals. And the story starts telling you about carbon and the interconnectedness of life. And you see those three animals as messengers of the world we live in. And you can choose all the stories and you enter the story. Each story is around 8 minutes long, where you follow the animal. As you can see here, that will be the bald ibis. And then after you watched all three stories, you end up again in the menu. That's the white stage. As you can see with the trailer, you are embodied in the world. So you can play around with the carbon particles. And then the story shifts. And first time, you're also addressed personally, and that should appear now. You will get a human shadow. So we're working on now that is really built also out of the carbon particles. Here it comes. So first time you are a human in that system, making you think how you are relating to those creatures. The second thing is that we did, and I will start that in parallel, is that we chose the camera in a way. You can see on the left-hand side that you can get closer to the animal in the world. You can fly with them, you can turn around, you can choose your position. So you're actually moving with the animals. And on the right-hand side, you could see that we integrated a kind of a look at interaction. So when you are with the animals and you are looking at the birds, they will come close to you and look at you. So they really see you also in that world, right? So you're embodied in the world of Myriad and can interact with those animals. Same as you can see with the turtle here with the camera. And last thing, and that goes more also for the market and distribution, that we are going to extend the world of Myriad in a kind of an immersive installation where the VR will also be positioned. It will be one carbon block that's already built with glasses on it, and you can jump into the stories while certain science facts are also presented around. So this is what we're working on for the next 2-3 years. I think I'm going to stop here now because I think I'm a bit over time, and we can discuss maybe the learnings. If that's of interest, I can go deeper into the discussion, but I would like to give room for my other speakers. So I will stop the screen share. Just give me a second.
Thank you, Lena.
So thanks a lot. I hope that gave a little bit of an insight, and I'm happy to discuss further.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know if I'm.
Are you with us? Yes.
I can only see myself. There we are.
Proszę o przypięcie Fryderyka teraz na główny ekran.
Thank you. Do you all hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and you probably see me jumping also a little bit. I have a little friend with me today. My little baby girl is on my belly at this stage, so please bear with me if she's putting a word into this at some point. Yeah, so for myself, I was asked to give you just a little input regarding iDocs specifically, and also trying to find some parts of the answer of the puzzle question: why web-based interactive experiences? And so for myself, as Christoph has said at the beginning, I've worked on different interactive pieces, interactive documentaries mostly. And throughout the years, the technology has changed a lot. We've seen the evolution that Lena just pulled us into, although the two projects she presented are pretty much multimodal or have different forms of media. We see a definite move from the web to more this type of VR experience. And so the question is not so much where the market is, because to be quite frank, from my own experience, there is no true market for these types of experiences if we talk about web-based projects or VR projects. The question is rather where we can find the right niche for the stories that we're telling. And all the projects that Christoph has also pointed to that are partly in development, they all, in my view, have a space, a niche where they can find their audience. If I go back a little bit in history, there were there are three main platforms that are relatively well known for these types of artistic pieces and types of narratives. So we're talking about the IDFA Doc Lab, the International Documentary Festival in Amsterdam. They have this Doc Lab section that is curated every year, and they have shown as much web-based as more immersive experiences. There is the National Film Board in Canada, so that would be nfb.ca, which they also have a lot of projects on display there. And there's also the website of Arte in many languages that I think are good places to start your journey. If you're not so much into these forms, then those three addresses should be places to go to. But more and more we see a shift towards things like schools and museums. So one of the niches that I see where these forms of narratives will develop into is, and I'm saying this based on the experience of a center in Montreal where I come from, which is called SAT, the Société des Arts Technologiques. This is a center where they create different media arts in Montreal, and they have started very early with a dome. They installed a full dome in that space, and they've experienced over 25 years now with that dome. And we can see that some of the VR experiences and augmented reality also are moving to these forms, to also planetariums. So if I think just in terms of Poland has something like 20 planetariums, including in Łódź. There's some, from my little research, there are 10 movable planetariums even in Poland. So this goes to show that there are not many spaces, but in most major cities, there are these areas where these forms of experiences that can be immersive and also collective at the same time can happen. And so I see this as one opportunity that is more and more coming up and that is structuring a little bit the space for immersive technologies. I also see a lot of niche possibilities for interactive graphic novels. Elena has shown some examples, but there are many more things that can be tried, also including with different publishers of graphic novels. There are many out there, a lot of independent publishers also. And I think there's a lot more that can be explored in terms of interactivity, that we go much deeper into how graphic novels can be experienced in an interactive fashion. I'd like to come back to maybe, and again, this is a very short input just to kick off the discussion also a bit later on, but I'd like to come back to some of the categories that Christoph has set up at the beginning. He told us that web-based interactive experiences are very good at connecting all kind of different objects. That was his main point, this kind of interoperability aspect of iDocs, of interactive documentaries or web-based experiences. And I would say, I would add to that, or even before that, I would say that there's a space for web-based interactive pieces to also just on the basis of their interface. These interfaces often bring people together. We can see that on topics that are very polarized. So I don't know about COVID-19 or some other topics that are where you have a big polarization in the audience. iDocs or web-based experiences are very good at bringing people together in an interface and having people who are not necessarily interested in the other side's argument listening to each other. And I think this happens also in immersive pieces, but I think web-based experiences specifically are very good at bringing people from different strands together and really making sure that there's a confrontation and that but still people listen to each other. So they're very good at training the listening aspect. And also I would tend to think that iDocs, and we've seen some of them out there in festivals and in schools, that they're also very good at having an impact. I think Christoph has mentioned more the aspect of visual literacy, but there are also other layers of impact that can be touched upon with these interactive formats. So having the audience really stepping into the experience, like in the case of Lena's projects or the ones Christoph presented, it really makes a difference of how people actually think about the topic or take a good example is the Net Wars project, where it is a relatively dry topic, a very intangible, very difficult to get at. And in having people really experimenting them in stepping into the story and influencing it potentially, we really have another layer of understanding. And so I think that this fundamental element that we had from the beginning of the web doc movement or web documentary movement is still actual today, is still current. The only question is where to reach the real audience. we've seen a big shift because people are using the smartphone, have been using the smartphone for a number of years. And so the screen has become smaller and smaller. The question is now, are we in a position, we as producers of these types of experiences, of placing them into museums, into places that are more exclusive? I mentioned also the educational sector. I think there's a lot, a big space that is unexplored at this stage. And there's a lot of content that can be brought to different audience in the school sector, particularly history topics, historical topics. Christoph has also mentioned a couple of projects that have a historical element to it. These are exactly the types of projects that I believe have a big potential in the educational sector, as long as the profs and the schools get their head around this and really show an interest in these types of interactive formats. Once they're there in the school, they're actually quite easy to explain and to get students motivated around them. And on that stream of thought, and I will probably be ending on that idea. I don't know if some of you have heard about the Korsakov software. This is a piece of software that has been around from the very beginning of the interactive documentary movement. And I'm mentioning it today because it is still being used in very impressive fashion to actually put together stories at the university level or at different high schools to create interactive film. And this is a very relatively simple software to tell interactive stories. And if we look at the sheer numbers, of how it's being used, it's being used 1,000-fold every year to tell different interactive films. And I continue encountering it even today. And so I think exactly based on this example that this potential is still at the very beginning. We're at the very early stage still. It seems as if the whole wave of interactive documentary is gone and that we've seen everything, that we've explored everything. But I think we're still at making our baby steps here in terms of exploring the different forms of interactive narratives that we can come up with. The big difficulty that we're composing with is the question of funding, and I'm sure we'll get to that in the discussion. Most of the interesting or ambitious projects are funded over a long period of time. You need to find the funds and have big producers on board to make them work. And then the technology is changing too fast. So we have this kind of conundrum or difficult situation where the funding is sometimes very hard to get and takes a lot of time. And on the other hand, we have the technology really, really changing fast, so that, for instance, this period that Lena described with iDocs, with NetWars, and now the period with Myriad, with more VR experiences, VR has basically replaced interactive narrative funding. It's very hard to get interactive documentaries or web experiences funded, and we haven't even gone to a stage where we've experienced in really, really interesting ways. We're still at a very basic level, in my opinion. So I'd like to finish on that, just saying that I think there's a lot of still to come, but we have this huge difficulty of the funding system that is hooked and is following these trends all the time. And once there's a new trend, the whole funding is going towards this new trend, leaving behind some of the more interesting, maybe, interactive forms that have been worked on. So that would be my short input today. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Maybe one word before I give you the floor, Eva, about what you said, historical topics. We had this one collaboration, I think 2 years ago, no, Kasia, with Karta, which is an institution that does oral history, and they're really big in this and very ambitious, and they tried to come forward and find a connection with the younger audience, and they collaborated with us too, among other institutions, organizing a hackathon in which Eva was also involved, of course, to find a way to narrate a story around one small town in Poland in the interwar period to represent the class and race conflicts that shot through the Polish society at that time, and to make it understandable and relatable to the young audience. And the project that won that hackathon was a project for a series on Instagram. No? But it was never realized, I think, no?
Yeah, I guess hello?
Mikrofon nie działa.
I guess they're still working on it, and yeah, we can mention the problem of funding, so that's it. Okay, I think I need to launch the presentation.
There you go.
Okay, so we heard a lot from the authors, creative producers, and graphic designers' perspective about their intentions, their projected experiences and outcomes. But my job was at the vnLab was to verify to what extent these hopes actually realized when presented with the living and breathing users, and not only the abstract target audiences or the personas, meaning the imagined viewers somewhere out there. And it's important to notice that those actual users, they have their level of digital competencies, but also their habits, the way they navigate the web. They have their preferences, etc., and it actually and all of those variables are actually taking part in how they experience the given project. So, so my research was basically, I did my research on two levels. One was at the level of the usability of the system. So I was testing how the system, how the given project is understood on the level of the pure functionality, usability. And the other one was at the level of the understanding of the narrative of the system, so more of a tutorial dimension of the project, and and I wanted to give you a couple of examples from the test, from the research, on how the intentions of the authors or designers are sometimes not that realized in a real life, and which would prove the necessity of the user testing and the more qualitative research into those digital narratives. So the first example is the project that Christoph already mentioned, which was the Amazon by Tytus Szabelski. And as Christoph mentioned, it was an archive of the Amazon in the form of the interactive archive, interactive database. And for the users, there was 3 ways in which they could explore the archive. One was the randomize button, which you can see on the right. And this button, as given its name, it was a random shuffle and pick the piece of information for the users to read using this algorithmic feature, which is also present at the Amazon platform. The other way was to explore the timeline at the bottom, so you can see the related topics, and it would give you the similar results, similar formats. So, for instance, if you would randomly get, let's say, a photograph or a piece of article, you would actually get, the system will recommend more of the same. So just like at the Amazon marketplace, you would get recommendation of more of the same content. And the third way, the most linear and straightforward, in which you would get a list of possible topics in more organized way, was in which the users would probably get the coherent understanding of the ways of how Amazon works, was the underline. It was by the clicking on the underscored working conditions kind of concept button, which would take you to this third ways of exploring the website. And it turned out that only about half of the users actually noticed this option, this functionality, and in results, they have a big trouble in grasping the archival, the database concept of the project, because they would mostly get this random algorithmic results. And this is an important, perhaps more in the context of how the cognitive motivation was the key motivation of the research. In other words, when users asked about what they are looking for when they are engaging with art or the cultural content, they would say that they are looking for gaining new knowledge. They are looking for new informations, getting to know something new. So when left only with the random disorganized bits of information, they left the experience rather unsatisfied. Another example is was the makeshift project by Paweł Starzec. It was the online exhibition of the photograph. Again, heavy on research and informations, combining photographies and stories behind a given photographies of a landscape. And there was, again, the interface was created as a map, and there were two ways to explore the exhibition. One was to be taken again algorithmically, randomly from one photograph to another photograph by the system. So going away with a preconfigured way of presenting the photograph, and the other one was an option to freely explore the map, to be able to choose which photograph a user would like to see, and yeah, basically to have a more agency and to be more autonomous while moving around the project. And again, only about half of the users that I tested, they noticed this option to freely explore the map. They thought about this go-to button in myriad ways. For instance, they thought it was a hyperlink to some external content. They thought that this was not at all connected to the project, or sometimes they even thought about that as a way of exiting the main interface. So in result, they actually, as I mentioned, half of them, they never really explored this free exploring option to actually move around the map and not being taken by the algorithmic choice. So, and the third example is the award, the school award project, which is currently under development. And in this example, a documentary which combined photographs and videos. One of the problems that users encountered while exploring the project was that, and somehow surprising to the authors and designers, was that, for instance, a big chunk of my testers, they thought that they expected this button school award. They expected it to be a way to a different, how to explain it, a different way of how we could explore two different parts of the project. Yeah, they thought it was a switch. So they thought that the project, instead of being a one big project, they thought it was separated by the part of the school and the part of the word, which was not at all designed like this. It was just this choice of the font. It was just purely aesthetic decision, which actually influenced how people understood they could experience and explore the interface. And I thought it was just a good example of how sometimes very simple and plain decision can influence how people perceive and understand a project. And since the idea of the interactive narrative is to give a very well-designed experiences, I think it's very important for us, for authors, for producers, but also researchers, to actually check how to test how the actual users are using the system, and how they understand all the options that we designed and provided for them. And I will be finishing now, and just left some time for us to have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. I'm going to move a little bit away from you to better see the screen with our discussants. What I can add maybe is that this was also one of the basic tenets of the lab in the beginning. This is something that we were declaring when we were starting, that what we would be doing here is a way of learning by doing. Yes, so we wanted to test everything we thought about in practice, and then through this kind of feedback loop, through the research, understand better our own gestures. Yes, and so this is also a very important part of the activities of the VR studio, and 2 panels will be dedicated to that tomorrow. And they have had a huge research project that accompanied the production of the VR pieces. So please stay tuned tomorrow, because there'll be much more of that kind of relationship. But now let's go back to the topic of our panel, to the interactive narratives. Do you have any questions at this moment to the presentations or the topics that were? Grzegorz Pochwatko.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful presentations. I have a short question. It's rather clarification question to Professor Thiele. I would like to ask you, how do you understand embodiment? Because I sort of get this impression that it's not replacing the physical body of the participant with the digital body in the experience. And the second question is, did you actually, because I didn't catch it, did you actually try to go into this idea of co-presence of the participant with the animals in the Myriad project? Because I get this impression that there's parts in which animals look at you are means to induce co-presence, but I wonder whether you anyhow checked whether it worked, because this is not what we expect from animals to do, for example, and then I don't know how people react to it.
I'm just jumping in, right? I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So thanks for the question. I mean, I just very quickly jumped over this topic of embodiment when I talked about the position and the character and the role of the user in the VR, because I mean, we all know this is one of the core questions then related to agency and presence and all the big concepts that you can really go into depth. What I mean here with embodiment mean that this is connected to the topic of presence, right? That you feel yourself being in the virtual environment, and that at a certain point also the mediated environment disappears, that you really feel present in the mediated virtual environment. And in our case, the embodiment, or what I will call embodiment in that sense, was supported by, you see all these different particles that we integrated. So it means that you can still feel your body, because your body leaves traces there. But we decided, for example, that you don't see your hands, right? So this is a decision that we made right on purpose, because we could have said you see your hands there with the controller, so you know you are you. You know, or at least you know you have hands, because there are other examples. For example, I don't know if you know the project Samsara, where you are seeing your hands and they're actually changing throughout the whole story. So You are a fictional character, but you are embodied in this fictional character. With us, we know you can feel that you are there. You can feel that you are in that virtual room without being defined who you are. So this is what we actually do at the end with giving you a shadow, defining you as a human being. So this is, if I understood the question correctly, how with our experience, we define the embodiment, the present, and then the role of the character. The second question, if I had a little bit sound issues, but I think it goes into the direction of the look to interaction, and that the animal is somehow looking at you and reacting to you. Is that correct? Can someone give me just a hint?
Sort of, because I was thinking about the idea of co-presence. So feeling that agents in the virtual environment actually are aware that the user is there, and sort of try to interact with the user. So,
if that works, yes. We had lots of discussions about interactions, by the way, because we began, and this is another. I could go deeper into that if we would have time. In the beginning, we had interactions that you could even choose different paths, right? Or we have the Arctic fox, so you can choose if they're hunting. And we felt, okay, this is completely switching the role of the user, because now you're deciding for an animal that you would never do. So we kicked out the whole interaction that actually has an influence on the reaction of the story. But what we did do is exactly this kind of co-presence at the moment when you look at those animals, and they look back at you at a certain point. And it's interesting because it happens quite subtle. And we tested it. Yes, we tested everything. So we do have this loop tests, right, that you're talking about. Whatever we do, of course, we test it in our groups, and then we put potential users in there and see how those things work. A lot also with the narration and the timing, and that led to a lot of changes, by the way. So those loops, they happen. And we also tested this kind of look at interaction, and it's very subtle. So I would say that 70% they do this, and they also feel this kind of moment of connection there, and then 30% they don't. But that is perfectly fine for us, because if you don't, it's not really failure to the story, right? It's more like an add-on that we have, and it's only once in each story. And when you say that normally animals don't do that, it's in all the stories, mostly at the end. So you are somehow accompanying those animals for quite a long while. And everything was double-checked also with the scientists. So every story, there was a scientist attached to it, who worked with those animals, that the animal reaction and the way how the animals would react are really very, very close to what the scientists could confirm. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that animals do not do that at all. It's just what people actually experience. What is the people's experience? So, for example, if you are aware of how animals usually behave, is that, for example, you can worry that animal that looks at you is somehow sick or something if you have such an experience. So it's rather something that is disturbing for the user, could be disturbing for the user, instead of making this immersion or feeling of presence and co-presence stronger.
I think I mean, as I said, we tested it, and it's quite at the end of the story, and there's a voice-over narration there as well. So it is integrated also in the narration moment where we talk about relationships. So I think but yes, we tested it. We tested it with up to 50 people. So those things were always tested in different loops. And there was no kind of disturbance. There was more like positive or no reaction, right? I didn't feel that this actually happens, or I did feel in a positive way. And those two,
which
for
could
me,
be actually the proof of our disconnectedness with the nature.
Yes, exactly.
But of course, it's perfect. It's perfect. Wonderful.
But thank you for your question.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions at this moment?
Yes, Jenki. Hi, Lauren Dubowski. I have a brief comment, and then I have a question actually for all of the speakers. Thank you for your presentations. They were really fascinating. My comment is, I think it's important to highlight when we're talking about web-based experiences to think about access. This is a really strong argument, I think, on the level of audience, market, funding, all of the things that everyone spoke to a bit, and thinking about what audiences do not have access to museums. Maybe they live in a remote area, maybe it's a financial constraint. I worked on a transmedia project, Queer in a Time of Forced Migration, with Tamara Shogalu at Ado Ato Pictures in Amsterdam, and this project was about the LGBTQ community in Egypt, and there's actually a danger for audiences there to publicly attend events, but the web-based version, Tamara, as the director, had this mission of being able to share the project with people who don't have access. So I think that's just something, I'm sure it's all on your minds, but something important to talk about, also because it can be helpful for not only those audiences, but creators wanting to reach new audiences. And then my question is about kind of narrative strategies for these web-based projects. Something that has been a challenge for me as a writer is thinking about, okay, when you're creating a web-based project with the desktop experience in mind, for example, and then in our project New Spirit, for example, with the vnLab, we talked a lot in the UX design process so far about the fact that most audiences will experience this on their phone. So I'm just curious, between the research project, the projects that you've been part of, the projects at the lab, are there any key projects that have actually not chosen between those different platforms, I guess, where audiences experience web-based projects, but that maybe had some strategies of an experience that works well on the phone and on desktop, for example?
Well, I can only say that as we designed our research, our tests, we've chosen the perfect kind of experimental setup and the ideal of, which is and another interesting insight, the ideal that the authors thought about their projects being viewed and being experienced was the desktop experience. So this is how I tested it. Whether people actually, use it more on desktops or on their phone, it's a different discussion. I think it would be necessary to really design more experiences for mobile, or design maybe a slightly different version for the mobile. It is precisely because we move very fast towards the mobile experiences, and I guess I think this is not. I mean, there's a lot of research and data that we usually, use our desktops for work. So while at the workplace or in this work state of mind, and for the entertainment, we actually move into the mobile. I'm a film historian, and I never thought I would do that, but since this year, I guess I was really trying to stay with either TV screen or the projection room that I had in my house, but I did. Eventually I started to watch Netflix series on my phone. I feel really bad about it, but I do it. So if I do it with a lot of resistance, I think that people without sort of respect and appreciation for the art of film would do it even faster, and just that would be their principal mode of how they experience visual content. And I just wanted to say, maybe just I thought it would be important to mention that the context of the web-based interactive project is really demanding, in the sense that each and every user, so us basically, we are just a click away from moving to a completely different window, a completely different, either Gmail, Facebook, social media, to completely different task. So the task of keeping the user with the experience, it's actually very important, and that's why this usability and this navigation, really formal UX part of the narrative, it has to be perfect in order to keep the user with our project. So yeah.
Frederick and Lena, if you want to add something.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just from my side, like most of the projects I worked on, we really made sure to have different versions. Like that's, you also speak, Lauren, to one of the complications when finishing a project, a web-based one, is to actually get this piece that you've produced for, let's say, at least in the teams I was with, we really prioritized one format. So we said, okay, it's for the desktop first and foremost, and then we have other versions for for smartphones. And then the question is, what smartphones and with what functionalities? The iPhone, yes or no, and so on. And so we kept working on producing different versions. It really adds a lot at the end of the production process. You can, of course, take off-the-shelf solutions for interactive documentaries. For instance, you can use some software that is already doing this kind of testing beforehand. But in my experience, it's often a lot of work at the end, this testing phase, right? Again, there's no real tip I would have for the narrative strategies. It's really maybe just to settle on one format that you feel is the most important to your specific audience or audiences, and making sure that you serve, these audiences with that format. And then the other ones, if the definition or the interface doesn't work as perfectly, then well, this is something you need to live with. And then just a tiny comment on the question of access. I totally agree. Access is absolutely key, and it's also one of the reasons why you, I guess, engage in web-based experiences, because it's accessible from so many places. People on different, on a phone, on a desktop, with different operating systems can actually still see a story being told in a compelling fashion. The one point I would add on access is, and I think it's one of the big unresolved issues that we have in interactive narratives, is the question of long-term access, which is this question of archiving. That opens up a can of worms. There's a lot to say about archives, but I think we haven't really been good at least people working on interactive projects have not been really good at making sure that these projects are accessible in 7-10 years time and really work well in that period of time. Yeah.
I mean, I can just quickly add to that, I think, Frederick, and also you mentioned quite a lot already. So I may have a little bit a different approach coming from the narrative side from projects. First of all, access, yes, of course. This is, for example, in our case, why there is a web-based format as well with different content, right? Because that will serve a broader access, because VR and also installations, it will be quite limited, right? So it's a different kind of accesses with the different experiences formulated based on the goals of your project. And this is also when you ask about mobile and browser-based, or web-based, and then on my laptop, computer, and mobile, I think for me, it's always two things. One is, of course, having the one that you have on the browser for the computer optimized available on the smartphone. But the second is, and this is the core thing that I also work for, is that you find when you look at the audiences and the way how they use the devices, it maybe makes sense to have something that is on the web accessible on the mobile, but you have a different format specifically for the entertainment or informational use on the mobile that may then feeds into different apps or social communities or. So for example, even we do this with a VR, full VR, we extend a Quest VR that is a completely different concept behind it, working with the same content because it's a different platform and the usage is slightly different, the market and the distribution and the access is different. That means that the way how we structure the story and the whole experience will be different. And this is why there are so many formats and it looks so big, even if a lot of those contents is reused, but it's always shaped, no matter if of full dome or mobile or web, for the specific platform. So we always start with a story and then go into the audience or the story to audience and then experience, and then the format is always last. So this is connected. This is at least how I approach the projects that I'm working on.
Yes, thank you, Lena. And what I would maybe add is, from my point of view, it's super important to have a mobile version. I mean, it will never be, if you are focused on a desktop experience, it will never be the full-fledged one, but there's nothing more frustrating than if somebody enters an interactive web-based experience and they get the message, this experience is designed for desktop, please change to your computer. And that is something where you immediately lose your audience. Yes? So giving something that is interesting or makes you want more or try the other format, that is definitely a way that we should be going. One experience I really like, it's called The Migrant by Anais Lopez. It's a storytelling experience about a bird, basically, which is also a graphic novel, and it's based on actual storytelling in real space. And well, there is no difference between the desktop and the mobile version because it's basically a streaming series. Yes, so you can watch it like a Netflix thing, 5 20-minute episodes. So that is also one way you can go. But if you want to have more, if you want to make use of the space of the screen to place elements, to put them in a relationship with each other, well, then there's no possibility to just squeeze everything back into the mobile version. No. One more thing I wanted to say maybe about the challenges of doing interactive forms is that, I mean, the projects that you showed us, Lena, especially, I mean, those are huge productions, also with big budgets. And there's this question of scale. And I think this has also to do with something that I call literacy, because is it always like this, that if we want to make a good interactive project that we have to go to this scale, try multiple platforms, and is it the only way to go? On the other hand, you can do today small projects, for example, if the creators themselves are able to code, yes? Or if they have these skills in the team, and we have one team like this here, and that is also something that totally changes, not totally, but significantly changes the budget. If the team that wants to create something, if you have a programmer, a designer, a storyteller, a cinematographer, and they form a team, they don't have to hire somebody from outside, yes? So Overgrowth is something that is being developed like this, and that has been a fantastic experience. Yes, a small group of people who know each other still from university, and they have started to do something together, and that is also something that I think is one of maybe a possible answer to the question that Joanna asked in the first panel. I mean, about the question of the artists. For example, for me, in my work with my students here, I find it most interesting when the students share skills that the others don't have. And not that everybody does their own project and then they show it as something closed off and autonomous, but if you see them exchanging skills and helping each other in different aspects of their practice. And but this is one other thing that is super important, super difficult, is this jump from narrative and graphic design and visual storytelling to the development of these narratives. Yes, so programming. And from my experience, this has been the biggest hurdle, finding people who would like to do this, programmers who don't cost $1 million, programmers who would be interested in doing open source experimental coding, programmers who would like to speak this language, who would like to be involved in such a process. And this also means going to a different university, going to a technical university, and finding a common language. And from what we've been doing here, also in another aspect, in digital publications, this process of finding a common language and of understanding each other and finding common ground, that was for me the most difficult thing. It's really hard to find, to build a team like that.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add something, that's why I still, after a couple of years of working with hackathons, organizing, coordinating hackathons at different public institutions, especially museums, I still believe that this is a very good format for really for people with different skills, either graphic designers, coders, researchers and storytellers to meet and for a couple of days, sometimes a couple of weeks or even months, to come up with a project and really working on it. And actually, vnLab is one of the best examples. You mentioned the hackathon at the Karta in Warsaw, and the Instagram narrative that never really saw the finish line. But one of the teams that didn't win at the hackathon, they actually applied for the scholarship, for the grant at the vnLab, and they are I guess they are finishing their projects right now. So and the hackathon in a very demanding formula at the time, because it was fully online. It actually helped them to come up with this common language and the idea for this project. So I do believe that this interdisciplinarity, in which hackathons really really demands, is one of the formats to perhaps change this individualistic way of how artists works.
I can just jump in for 2-3 words. I think that I completely agree with small interdisciplinary teams, and I think this is what we do. Well, we put in the whole term of co-creation, right? That we are pushing for, especially in our studies, where we have people coming from completely different countries, cultures, and also professions. So this is like kind of peer learning, co-creation projects where we really try to connect people and make them work on projects and actually share their knowledge. And it's the same, even if these are, yes, I know they are huge productions, but I'm completely not saying that everything has to be as huge as this. I was saying it to my students. So some of the most beautiful projects that I at least mentored and worked with are very small and precise projects. So it's really about, I think, getting to the heart of it. So not making it big. It's just the way that I don't know, it's maybe the way that my brain works, that everything is set up in a world and it has the potential to scale. It doesn't mean that everything has to be there. There's always just this potential, and it's like a seed, right? Where a lot of things could grow, and sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. But yes, and I think this kind of interdisciplinary team, this is also we have a very small core and flexible team, and then it grows with the project, right? But it is a core team who actually stays at the heart of the project. And this is something, no matter if it's scientists or creative technologists or film people coming with film backgrounds, so it's completely open, historians and projects, right? Because this is where those projects, you understand the needs, you integrate the knowledge, and you build something to convey the different knowledge into a format that makes sense. So yes.
Thank you, Lena. And I have one more thing to say.
One more question from the audience.
Sorry, Roman.
Hi, my name is Roman. I wanted to ask Lena, first thank you for showing us Myriad and Networks, great projects. And I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that you were working on these projects for a couple of years, how do you maintain the technical stuff? I mean, within 2 or 3 years, the technical libraries or programming languages are changing very rapidly and fast. And also, this also comes to the archiving stuff. Do you have any strategy for such a big project to this be accessible in, let's say, 5 or 6 years? And last question, you mentioned the Flash websites back in the days. Did you find a way to show it today? Is it possible to reach this? And what way, other than the planetarium, which Frederick mentioned, that this could be some place where you can access some stuff? Is there any way to archive, let's say, Flash websites and make them accessible today? Thanks.
I will try to keep it short, because I could answer like in a long. These are all huge topics. First of all, maybe it's also always a discussion when it comes to the decision on technology, because we know, right, that those projects take a long while. So, for example, here we work with Unity. If you would make the decision now, we would have switched to Unreal, not knowing yet, right, because it's shifting. You don't know, but we decided for Unity still works. To make the assets, and this is important because we think in those projects that those assets are available in the other platforms. So you don't only have to make the decision on technology for one, but for all the others to reuse it. And so you always look at what is the best for now and where do you think the market is moving into, and what would that mean? And sometimes you can really fail, as with the Flash website, right? We should have gone to HTML back then, right, to HTML5, but we decided for Flash because it was a budget issue and a time issue. And the programmers, they were power flashers, so they really knew how to get it done. While with Networks, for example, it was a different agency and they were also power flashers. They had no Flash anymore. It was still the decision. And we switched to HTML5, which was a good decision. And yes, it's a risk, especially when you go into the installation that is planned for a longer time. So there we are trying to see what is like the most constant, and we get really people in consulting us when those projects get that big on technology. But it is a discussion. And then regarding the Flash website, no, we haven't. I mean, that is archived on CD-ROMs, so with the whole library, so you can still do that, right? So you can still load it, but it's not really accessible apart from that, which is a shame. So I'm really open because that was really also a license to different public broadcasters in, I think, 12 or 15 different languages. So it's a huge project. And it's really sad that it's not available anymore. And they tried to put it on HTML5, but then the budget was too big. You had no one finance it because you could have, right? So the whole project is somewhere on a CD-ROM, which is a shame, but yes. So quick question for complicated question, quick answer.
I could maybe just add that some institutions do actually invest money in transferring, right? Some websites in Flash into HTML5. So the National Film Board in Canada has been doing that with the lighthouse projects, but then it's like 1 in 20. So there's a lot getting lost.
Yeah, and with technology, there's always this problem with obsolescence, and how do we escape that? One quick note, I wanted to talk about you actually, Roman, before you raised your hand. In terms of the small teams and this collaboration between visual creatives and programmers. And for example, your team is for me exemplary in the sense that Roman Kuhl is a programmer and he collaborates with Paweł Brzeziński and they form Rhythm Interactive, a small studio. We've been collaborating on 2 projects with Amazon and now School the World. And it's been fantastic also because they work as a team and they work very closely together. So it's a very quick feedback loop, yeah. And it's also very agile in the sense that we were sitting in your office for hours and hours and talking about Amazon and how it could look, and it developed very quickly without finding all these, without building a huge team. And the same was with Michał Szota, who is a designer and a programmer at the same time. So we were able to build 3 prototypes and not design something and then be really sure that we really wanted that, not to waste the money on implementation, because Michał, he programmed 3 prototypes, yes, and now we kind of know what we want, and he's going to build probably a 4th one until we are ready, yes, but not always do you have this kind of comfort, yes, very often it's something that you have to plan it's like a film production, yes, so there's both aspects in this field involved, that you can do things that are very open and very agile, but you have to have these competences in the team, and then it kind of works. But there is one last question, because we are wrapping up in a couple of minutes. There's one question from our online audience. It's a question for Frederick. Frederick, could you please elaborate a little more on the new possibilities for interactive graphic novels you mentioned? It's a question from Agnieszka Przybyszewska. I might add one thing, is that Mechanical Souls, the project that we are showing here at our exhibition, also has a graphic novel version, or extension, or supplement, or however we could call it, yes?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Actually, I see for interactive graphic novels, I see the possibilities in having them, more present, especially in the museum space or the mural space. I think we've done some of it, with desktops. We've tried that. We've been there, and has not really picked up really. Some iPad stories or graphic novels have worked so, but we never went to a place where this became sort of a mass phenomenon. And I think if we think of them more in bigger spaces, so like in a conference setting, a museum setting, where it takes up a whole mural. I think that the graphic novel style has been making a lot of inroads, also even in more documentary genres. And I think there's much space for augmenting them with forms of interactivity, not just to add interactive elements to them, but to actually help the audience step into these graphic novels and explore some elements of detail, for instance, by interacting with them in a mural space. So I think there have been some examples, but not so many at this stage in interactive graphic novels in a very big format. And so I'm looking forward to some of them. I've just seen a few of them in the Eye Museum in Amsterdam, where they're experimenting with that. But I think there's much more to develop there. Thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions, or should we call it a lunch break? Lena and Frederick, thank you very much for joining us online. Maybe next time it will be possible to see you away from the keyboard here in Łódź. We are going to work towards that. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Eva. It was fantastic to talk to you today. Thank you, everybody. And we have now a lunch break. We'll meet again at 3 over digital publications.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.